Calibrating cybernetics.
Talk to him now.
AT Andre.
Come on, Dre.
Yep. Tripping with Let's Go. Woo! Tripping with Theo Bowl.
What's your name?
Theo So Bowl.
Yeah.
Driggity. Let's go. Tripping with Theo Bowl. Tripping.
What are we doing?
Tripping with Theo Bowl.
Come on, Dre.
Yo, hey, what's going on, y'all? And welcome to the 158th episode of Tripping with Theo Bowl. I'm your host, Andre Theo Bowl. Welcome to the show. As you guys know, every episode that ends in a 6 or an 8 is dedicated to the lovely women of the 688. Before we go any further, make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell a friend to tell a friend. Do all that fun internet stuff like the old people say. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. Before I get into it, shout out to my comedian bro, my comedian brethren, G King. Bought this hat off of G King. It's a nice little knit hat. Got his G King logo in it. Make sure you guys go to his all his socials are G King. Let me actually make sure I'm getting it right, because I got to make sure I plug people the right way. Let me just do this right quick. So, boom. Yeah, G King Comic. G King COMIC. Make sure you check him out. Real funny dude, man. Always comes with the funnies, man. Real funny cat. Make sure you check him out. So, as you guys know, as I said earlier, this is a 688 centric episode, because this is episode 158. And as you guys know, I'm on my journey of I'm looking to see if my grandma left her fingerprint or her footprint through any 688 book, right? So right now I'm reading One Woman's Army, which is Major Charity Adams' recount of her service with the WAAC and the WAC and the 688. So the chapter I'm on right now deals with her military and duty assignments associated with her promotion. And this chapter, I think, is around chapter 8 or 9. It's basically, if you read the book, they're not really numbered by chapter. It's just like dates, right? So this chapter is entitled January 1st through December 15th, 1944. Right? So basically, it's about a year. Really, it's all in 1944, essentially, you know? So like I said, I'm looking for footprints to see if my grandma was there or anywhere around, you know, the vicinity, you know? So basically the roles that she had during this period was she basically traveled frequently on short posts. She was assigned to move troops to various posts. And then she also talked about attending Negro football classics over at, Soldier Field. So that would be like the equivalent of going to, like, Grambling versus Southern, how they have their game every year. So she was doing that. And then she basically had to perform all these duties while traveling and balancing work with personal visits from family and friends. So, yeah, it's the 1940s. So as you guys know, what I'm saying, she dealt with a lot of racial discrimination. That's how it was back then. In some cases, even now. Now I want to, so basically, basically right after she left, right after she went to go travel to, go recruit, or right when she got promoted, there was another black female officer that was beaten beaten in a waiting room due to racial prejudice, So basically she was like, yo, if I was still there, that could have been me, So, you know, um, terrible times, man, then she mentioned this whole staring incident on the train. Basically a white woman accused her of being an imposter, and demanded to see her papers, So she just kept staring at Major Adams, and then she basically the situation got handled by the military police, who then dismissed the accusation, that's terrible, right? That's end of the day, that's called getting on code, right? Like the police sergeant or the MP sergeant knew that the white woman was wrong. Um, and then, he didn't really want to deal with the situation. He knew who Major Adams was. And then, you know, um, they basically made her show her papers or whatever. But then, um, the military sergeant then dismissed the accusations or whatever, right? So that's called getting on code, right? Like if people are about truth and about justice, that dude knew, or the military police knew that was racially motivated, and since it was racially motivated, there should have been some charges that came with that. You know what I'm saying? But they get on code, and that's what happens. Um, some people might say, "Oh, he's just trying to protect his job." Well, I'm like, at some point, you got to take a stand, right? You got to be like, yo, you got to follow. At some point, you have to follow the rules to the T. Like what if a black person questioned the rank of a white person, right? They would have probably taken and threw the whole book at the black person. You know what I mean? So whatever. Um, what else happened, man? She yeah, there was the dining car situation where she was denied service. Um, yeah, she was denied service. But then basically she was eventually seated, So this was when she was en route to, I think, Chicago, or I don't remember the exact details, but she was on a train, and then she was in a dining car and then had to go through this. Um, there's another situation. This is the situation that I really wanted to hit on. There was a situation where there was an altercation at the training center. And basically what happened is she was called on to mediate um, between a physical and verbal dispute between a black cook and the white kitchen police, or white KP. I think KP is kitchen police, right? So I had to go back and reread this section reread that part a few times because I wanted to make sure I got it right. And I could still get it wrong, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not perfect. But nah, basically, the white KP like said that she didn't want to work with, you know, niggas, you know what I'm saying? And she said it just like there was like the hard R, she didn't want to work with them, and then the black cook, you know, uh, through a racial epithet. I said epithet, through a racial epithet back at the white KP, and then they got to swinging, and then they had to go and get them physically broken up. Now, when I first read this, I thought Major Adams saw this, but she didn't after I read it a couple times, basically, the way she resulted this, or the way she ended all this, was she was like, she basically punished both parties to be fair. Right. And to me, if she was there and saw this, to me, like, that wasn't the right thing to do, because, and some, like, there are three sides to this, right? There's the black side, the white side, and then there's truth, you know? Um, and, or let's just call it justice, and, uh, basically it's like, since Major Adams is black, if she saw this and if she was there, and since she's in a position of leadership, to me, like if she saw this whole thing transpire, um, and it's obvious, or per the story, the white person or the white KP started it, you know, Major Adams should have got between the black and the black cook and the white KP and put her back towards the Negro cook and been like, yo, what did you call her? You know? And then if she said it to her, now it's her problem. And then now she's in the position to where she can teach and show the black cook how to deal with situations like this, right? If you're in a position of leadership. But that wasn't the case. She wasn't there from for how it was written. Basically, she was called upon to mediate between the two, and then she recommended punishing both parties, trying to be even Steven and trying to be fair, you know. So to me, I don't really agree with that. I mean, yeah. I feel like, she could have punished both parties, but I think, she has to get on code with black people and kind of pull her aside and say, look, I know, what she said was wrong. She started it or whatever, but you got to like remember where we at. And, this is how you should move along. Like, there was no, it was like she was kind of removing herself from the situation, and to me, it's like when you remove yourself from a situation, it's like you're kind of getting on code with the opposition, because look at this, right? If there's all these other white people around watching it, other white people that saw this and saw that the white KP was wrong, if they stood around and watched this, then they're just as guilty, right? That's called getting on code. You know what I'm saying? So if white folk back then could get on code with each other like that, why couldn't black people get on code, right? And when I say get on code, it doesn't mean necessarily to just take sides, but get on code means that, hey, look, there's a way how we're gonna uniformly move through this, So now it's like the black cook is left there standing alone on her own, when you got the other white forces that are kind of all sitting around watching all this, and then because Major Adams, because she played it by the book and just recommended punishes for both parties, it's kind of like she took the side of the dominance, you know what I'm saying? So I don't agree with that, but nobody's perfect, This kind of reminds me of this kind of reminds me of one thing I've noticed about like my family in general, and my grandma is that one thing about my grandma that I remember is that, she got on code with me, when I was like young. She saw in my neighborhood, she saw that I was this is when I was in Maryland, when she would come down to visit. I remember there were times when like my neighbor was white. I had a white neighbor at one point, then I had an Indian neighbor at one point, or a brown neighbor, and I just played with who I played with, and then there was another black neighbor that was like way around the corner, which was like kind of far from my house, and every now and again we met up to go play, but it was never always playing like as a group. So my grandma saw that, and I remember one day she saw me like, outside just playing, having fun as a kid. And she was like, don't you got any black friends? I was like, yeah, I got so-and-so around the corner. And then she said, look, I'm going to tell you this once, you need to, it's okay to be friends with everybody, but you got to be friends with your own kind too, because when you get older, you'll see it's going to be different, and I was like, what? Like, I'm just playing. But then when I got older, I saw what she was saying, right? That's called getting on code, right? It's basically, she's telling me like, she's being honest with what I'm going to see later on in life. You know what I'm saying? She's being like, she's keeping it 100. That's being on code, right? But if you if you sit up here and just ignore it and just we all just one big happy family and everything is going to work itself out some kind of way, knowing that it hasn't worked itself out for the past couple centuries, you're just setting somebody up for failure. You know what I'm saying? So, but that's one thing I noticed about my grandma, you know. But something else I noticed about my grandma too is that I've heard stories. Like I said, I'm not saying that this is absolute gospel, but I've only heard stories of my grandma like squabbling and fighting with black dudes who weren't shit. You know what I'm saying? Like she was known to have I'm not gonna say this is like a family secret. I'm not gonna go into that just yet. Like you gotta be all in, and I gotta make sure you locked in to me in this channel before I start giving away all the secrets. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, now my grandma, you know, there's stories about her like, you know, fighting with like getting into like physical altercations, and like getting into like verbal squabbles or verbal arguments and squabbles with like black dudes who weren't shit, you know. But I never heard any stories about her getting into fights or cussing out white people, which is very interesting to me. You know, I never heard any stories about that. I saw it one time, and today I believe is, I don't like dating the podcast. I don't like dating the episodes, but today's March 22nd, and I believe today is my Uncle Sammy's heavenly birthday, man. So happy birthday, Uncle Sammy. You know, I think it's March 22nd because it took us a while to find his what do you call it? It took us a while to find his obituary, and when we found it, I thought he was born on March 23rd, but I think he was born on March 22nd. But my Uncle Sammy, that's my grandma's brother, and my uncle lived with my grandma. So when I would go and visit them in the summertime, like I was really spending a lot of time with my Uncle Sammy, you know, doing chores around the neighborhood and stuff. But I remember one day I saw my grandma go off on my Uncle Sammy, man, and that shit was scary, you know. Like I remember I was at the kitchen table in the dining room, and I remember I gotta get a sip of water to make sure my throat is clear for this one. But what happened was my grandma. So my Uncle Sammy used to drink a lot. Like he used to get drunk. I mean, he used to get hammered, you know. And he was like tall and like skinny, or like real lanky. And I remember my grandma, you know, basically she made breakfast in them, or I was eating breakfast at the dining room table. And my grandma, she was known to like hold on to food a little too long, you know, because she grew up in the Great Depression or whatever. And, you know, she would keep things well beyond its due date, right? So I remember I was eating some cereal, and the milk in my cereal tasted kind of funny. It tasted like a little, like it just tasted funny, and it had like a weird smell to it. Like it kind of tasted like what it just had like a musty taste to it. You know what I'm saying? Like it just tasted funny, you know? And it's about maybe like 7:30, I think, in the morning. And Uncle Sammy walks in the door. So this is his first time, you know, like coming in from being out overnight drinking and shit, you know? So he goes upstairs, and I'm eating my cereal, and I'm trying to eat it, and I'm like struggling with it or whatever. And I just go, Grandma, man, I said, something smell funny, you know? And she was looking to get in a fight with my Uncle Sammy. She was like, "Oh, you smell that too? You smell that too? Sammy! Sammy! Sammy!" And she called Sammy, and he'd be like, "What, Nana?" And then you see him come downstairs, and then she was just cussing him out. She goes, "We out drinking again last night?" He's like, "No, Nana, no, Nana, I wasn't out drinking. No, no, no." And she's like, "You were too, motherfucker. Yeah, motherfucker, fuck. And it's all these F words going back and forth. And my grandma was like a little short lady, you know what I'm saying? And she had her neck like turned to the side, looking at my Uncle Sammy, just like, you know, cussing him out. And you saw this like big vein come down her neck. And I thought they was going to get to swinging. I'm sitting there with this bowl of cereal with this old ass milk. watching these two getting ready to like throw down, and they were like, and they were, and the way they ended the argument was, well, fuck you, then, well, fuck it then, and Uncle Sam was like, man, fuck it then. And then he went upstairs. Then he went back upstairs. But man, I never seen my grandma get mad like that. You know what I'm saying? But the reason I bring all this up is because, like, I never seen her get that way, like, around white people. I'm not saying she has or hasn't, but I just never seen it. Like, it almost seems like there was like a reverence to be like, yo, you can't piss white people off because they got the power and they'll make you disappear. So maybe, I don't know. But that's just how I see it, when I reflect on things like this. And then I look at my parents, right? Like, I never seen them. I've heard about them, like, telling other races off when they were in the wrong, but I never seen it, never seen it. Not saying that it didn't happen. It's just one of those things where it's like, this is interesting. Is there something here? Maybe not. Maybe I'm just tripping. But anyways, moving on. In this chapter, she talked about, family visits. Her father came to visit. She talks about how it was in Des Moines, Iowa. And how, the way she described white encounters and white people in Iowa is kind of like my experience in Iowa. It was like, white people in Iowa are going to be like they're real pleasant. Like, they're like, soft spoken, but that, there's something like a little, I don't want to say off, not in a bad way, but it's like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like, they're very tolerable. How about that? If that's the right word to use, like they're very tolerable. And they're just, a lot of times they seem like they're like a little over polite, Not everybody. I don't like to put everyone in one group, but my experience was when I got to Iowa, I felt like they were being a little too polite. It was like they were it was almost like they were afraid of saying the wrong thing to cause like a racial uproar, or it was, hey, we gonna talk our shit behind closed doors, but we're gonna make sure that you don't know about it. It wasn't like I said, I don't want to put Iowa in that whole bucket, but that was just my honest my honest take on when I was in Iowa, right? So I could kind of relate to what she was saying, when she was talking about her interactions with white people in Iowa. Yeah, then she I didn't know her brother also served. I didn't know Major Adams' brother served or whatever too. She mentioned him returning from the India Theater of Operations, so I didn't know anything about that. What else? She participated in she basically was, I guess she kind of kept gravitating towards music, so like she talked about like learning how to pick up playing the piano again and how bad she was growing up. And she said, you know what, this is something I want to master. So she actually in her spare time took lessons to get better at playing the piano. The thing that was kind of sad too was like basically you had these two bands, right? So right now it's 1944, so it's the Women's Army Corps. It's no longer the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. And there was a band, right? And the bands were segregated. So the white band basically had all the money, but you had like a lot of like black musicians that were like dope that could have been in that band, but they never made the cut for that band. So then they had to kind of form their own band with the leftover money that was available. So they formed there was the black, or they called the Negro Whack Band, so basically there were it took several attempts for them to kind of get going, but once they did it, but she was more, I think, in organizing it and making sure that they had the funding to go do it. I don't think she was actually in the band. but they went across the country and they did bond drives. I never thought about that, right? So if you're a financial guru, in times of war, you got to start issuing them bonds, so that's interesting. It's kind of like a more fancier version of jump rope-a-thon. Like I remember jump rope-a-thon, how you got to go around the neighborhood and get people to sign up, how much they gonna pledge for how many. Okay, I'm dating myself. I'm kind of getting old. Let me go ahead and get off of that. Jump rope-a-thon. I should probably do an episode on that because a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about jump rope-a-thon. I remember that shit. What else? Oh yeah, I got yeah. Um, yeah. So you kind of see like she was bumping elbows with right people with different higher ranked people as she was moving up the chain. Um, she basically got invited by a major to go to the officers club, which was like a hoity-toity like high level thing amongst all the ranked officials, and she was the only black woman there. And then word got back to this colonel she called Colonel X. She uh basically she had to go visit him, or he summoned her to his office, and then basically Colonel X basically was just giving her this whole 45-minute racial like rate, like he was a stone cold racist. He basically was saying like, look, you're from my state, what I'm saying, you're from South Carolina, and I want to keep things the way they are. I want to keep things segregated, and I don't like how you're going to this mixing amongst us, so let's keep it that way. And just he said a lot of just he was being openly racist just to her face, and she just stood there and had to take it, which is sad. um you know but that to me was like it's weird. It's like when you like everyone says what they would have done, should have done, could have done, all this woulda, shoulda, coulda talk, right? um I it's like when I was in corporate America, man, when I was working, I'm not like I never had to deal with anything like that where people were just blatantly talking to me about how they didn't like black people and how they didn't want me to fit in. But I had conversations with like leadership and like management um where in different companies where the undertones were there. And it was like, you know what? Like at some point I just tune people out, man. Like if you on that if you on that dumb shit, I just shut my brain off. That's one skill I learned in corporate America, man, that I'm really good at, man, is how to just shut my brain off. I'm like remember in Star Wars episode 4, the first one, right? A New Hope. You remember when uh C3PO and it's a C3PO at Luke's like in his his little handy shop or whatever, and he's in his handy shop or whatever, and he's basically like C3PO's kind of going off at the mouth or just giving information, trying to be helpful. And then he says, if you won't be needing me, I'll be shutting down, sir. Ooh, and he shuts down. That's how I was in corporate America, yo. Like if it wasn't about work, my brain would just shut off, and I could see people I could see mouths move, but I would be in a whole different world. Um, I was probably in my phone doing DraftKings and shit, what I'm saying, trying to get some money on the side. But when I hear like shit like, that doesn't that's counterproductive to me getting my check, I just shut my brain off. So I'm wondering if she kind of like developed that skill too, to where she could just kind of be like, you know what, this person's talking at me, because I learned this in football. When I played football, I had a coach. He said, there's a difference between talking to people and talking at people. He says, when people talk to you, that means they care about you, and they want to see you succeed and they want to see you do well. When people talk at you, it's like they don't want to even hear or process anything that you say. They're just kind of going through lip service, and, I'm pretty good at determining if someone's talking to me or talking at me. If someone's talking at me, sir, if you won't be needing my services, I'll be shutting down now. And that's what I do, But anyways, one last thing. Now this part here, right? I can see my grandma I think my grandma probably went to this church, I think she was there around this time in Iowa, but I don't know what it is, man. Like, cause when I was in Iowa too, man, they be pushing them AME churches, man. It's like all the blacks got to come together. Hey, man, they got an AME church. Hey, man, you got to go to that AME church. Man, you got to, man, that's where all the good girls at, man. Yeah, you got to go to that AME church. I'm like, nah, man. I get my truth from Gino online. I don't need to mess with no false prophets. And look, let me stop. I'm going. This is not what this podcast is for. Anyways, but she said that, Major Adams said that she regularly attended, Protestant services and visited the AME church, the local church. And that's what my grandma was always about, man. Every time I lived somewhere, even when I was in college, when I went to school in Philly, my grandma's always like, you find a good church to go to? You got to find you a church to go to. You find you a church yet? And when I got to Iowa, you find you a church? You got to find you a church to go to. I'm like, why, Grandma? Well, how you gonna meet the women's? I'm like, yeah, I don't go to church for that. I go to church to get right with God, But anyways, Major Adams talks about this embarrassing thing that happened in her church. Basically, the pastor, basically the son was trying to run game in the church. You know what I'm saying? Or the son of the pastor was trying to run game in the church on all the military females that were there, and he told his father, who was the pastor, that he was engaged to Major Adams, but without even talking to Major Adams, So basically the pastor recognized Major Adams and was like, hey, we got Major Charity Adams, over here with the Women's Army Corps. She's doing great things. And then he stood up, and then she stood up for recognition. And then she sat back down. And then the pastor was like, yes. And my son, am I right? I say, my son is engaged to Major Adams, right? And then Major Adams stood up and was like, yeah, nah, that's not true. I'm gonna get my lawyer and he's gonna be in contact with you. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm saying. Them little church groups, man. Nah. Them little church groups be trouble, man. Them little church groups be trouble because you gotta think, they're in the middle of Iowa and there's only a small group of like black people out there. So they think, hey, man, shit, man. Right, they doing the head count. I remember back when I was in Iowa, where I worked at Rockwell Collins, so I can relate to this. I worked for this company in Iowa, and I was like one of the first blacks there. I mean, I don't want to say the first black there, but it was like they were trying to integrate like the workforce there because it was all white, So I was like, it was me and Deshaun. I think me and Deshaun were like the first two, maybe like one of the, like we were like in the first 5 out of like a couple thousand people. But me and Deshaun were the first ones there, and then there was more people coming in, right? So you had more groups of black people coming in, and then you had the ratio, right? It was always like the ratio where they had all the black men coming in first, and then you had maybe like 3 or 4 black women that joined the company, And the thing that was crazy was, the black dudes that were there, the black men that were there, they would go on the recruiting trips and they would recruit. And then they either knew someone from their school or they knew someone personally that they recruited. And they would recruit, like a female that they were trying to holler at, you know what I'm saying? So they would go, they would go out and recruit, and then we all go to like work. We all go to like the cafeteria one day for work. And there'd be a fine sister that walked in, and we all just looked like, man, who that? Man, who that? I'm like, man, who that? Who that? And the person that was quiet, it was like, oh yeah, you recruited her. Yeah, okay, we see what you're doing. Okay. But it was like when you're around like when it's only a small number of black people around a whole like lot of like white people, it's like black people are going to naturally come together in a group. And really what it was is like, okay, let's hang out. Let's see like if there's any like, similarities or whatever it is. And then once there's like no really similarities or whatever, or not similarities, but you just meet up to make sure that y'all okay, because no one else is like looking out for us there like that, so I could like kind of relate to that. I remember that whole little church thing where people would be like, hey man, you come to my church, and you go to their church, and then it's like, I'm good. Now I'm good with the word right here, man. I'm trying to get right with God, anyways, now that story, that kind of just, I can see that. I can see that happening, because I've been through that. Not through what she went through, but I can see kind of how situations kind of could like play out that way. What else? If we're only going further, make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, tell a friend to tell a friend, do all that fun internet stuff. Yeah, so I think I covered everything I wanted to cover from my notes based on that chapter. Yeah, like I said, I'm looking for footprints of like, my grandma being there, right? I know she was there, you know what I'm saying? But I'm looking for like small little things where I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely my grandma. She definitely saw that. And to be honest, I think my grandma was at that church. She could have been at that church, man. Because knowing my grandma, she was into going to church, And the one thing my grandma said about Major Adams was, which is one thing that my grandma always said about Major Adams was, we couldn't make her look bad. We had to make, like, we just couldn't make her look bad. We had to make sure we were on our P's and Q's to make sure that, we made her look good. You know what I'm saying? So my grandma, if she was in the church when that happened, my grandma probably, like kept orders and just were like, she was probably like, yeah, nah, I gotta let Major Adams handle this, because if I get out of line and make her look like, we're not trying to make her look bad. So that was the one thing that my grandma always echoed when she did start to talk about her service in the 688 and the Women's Army Corps. So yeah. What are y'all thoughts, man? Leave your comments in the comment section below. But yeah, so I think I'm all chatted out, like I said before, AT is where it's at on most forms of social media. Make sure you follow me. And thanks again for tuning in, man. And without further ado, I'm out here, folks. Peace. Yep. Tripping with Theobald.
Let's go.
Caliente.
Tripping. Yep. Tripping. Tripping with Theobald.
Tripping with Theobald.